Tonight on Greater Boston, temperatures are up and so are COVID hospitalizations, thanks to the new BA.5 variant. Dubbed the most transmissible yet, what should we be doing to stay safe? And are state and federal officials doing enough to help keep us safe? Two local doctors join me. Plus, which American companies are responding to life after Roe v. Wade by coming to the aid of their workers, and why? The answer for most companies leading the charge on reproductive access may not be what you think. And finally, yet another essential infant care item in short supply for those who need it most. There's another new dominant COVID strain in town and across the nation. It's yet another subvariant of Omicron, this one called BA.5. And I know I sound like a broken record, but researchers say this strain is the most contagious and vaccine-resistant yet, with recent reinfections accounting for much of the latest surge. While we used to religiously recite the daily case rates, not anymore. Between the state having just switched to weekly reporting, many people testing positive on at-home rapid tests, then not reporting their case at any official level, and there are plenty who don't bother testing at all anymore. But a few facts you cannot argue with. Hospitalizations are on the rise. Eastern Massachusetts wastewater data shows case levels don't seem to be falling and are way above where they were in March. And people are still dying of COVID in Massachusetts at a rate around 65 people per week over the last several weeks, closing in on 20,000 deaths overall. So how worried should we be? How much will the future look like the past? And what kind of precautions should we and our elected officials be taking? I'm joined by Dr. Sabrina Assoumou. She's assistant professor of medicine at Boston University School of Medicine and an infectious disease attending physician at Boston Medical Center. Dr. Paul Sachs is clinical director of Brigham and Women's Infectious Disease Division. Doctor, good to see you both. Again, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Dr. Assoumou, the Washington Post today quotes an academic who tracks pandemic trends, and his quote is, "This is the worst version of the virus we've seen." What does that mean?
Well, no, thank you for having us on today.
Sure.
So number one, when we have a new subvariant, there are three questions that I'm always trying to answer. Number one, is it more transmissible? Is it going to cause more severe disease? And is it going to evade immunity? So let's answer these questions with this new subvariant. So number one, is it more transmissible? Yes, it is more transmissible. And that means that we're going to see more people be infected. Does it cause more severe disease? At this point, the data have been a little mixed, so it's unclear right now, and we need to get more data to answer that question. And the last one is, does it evade immunity provided by our vaccine? So unfortunately, it does. But the good news is that if we actually get boosted, we increase our level of protection. So the big picture is it is a concerning subvariant, but we do have measures to improve outcomes.
Do you want to agree with any or all of those three, Dr. Sachs?
I agree with what she mentioned, and I also want to emphasize that it's not the worst virus yet, because the worst virus we've seen clinically, and that's what really matters, was the first one. And the reason that one was the worst is because we had no immunity at all. And the dominant effect on disease severity is how much prior immunity the population has. And our population now has lots of prior immunity from both prior infections and from vaccination. So even though case numbers are up, I want to say it's not the same as going back to square one back in 2020. We're far from there.
Well, let me try to parse this with you, Dr. Sachs, for a second. I was going to say I'm asking for a friend, but the friend happens to be me. I had COVID not once, but twice in May. And on that evading immunity question, my understanding from my reading in the last couple of days is being boosted twice, which I am, and having had COVID twice, which I have, is not a great, neither is a great protector of me. Am I wrong?
Well, I do think that COVID, or SARS-CoV-2, will ultimately be like other community transmitted coronaviruses, but we're not there yet. And I want to emphasize this, that the severity of the illnesses that people are getting are by and large much milder than they were at the outset of the pandemic, and that we do not see our ICUs overrun with COVID-19 cases. You did mention that hospitalizations are up. We have to watch that very carefully. But most of the time, cases have remained mild. I particularly worry about the immunocompromised population, but even though lots of cases are occurring, they're predominantly occurring in the community. They're not leading to hospitalizations. We have to keep a close eye on the numbers, but it's not as bad as it was before.
That's good to hear. Dr. Assoumou, should we be concerned that at least my informal analysis is virtually all public health measures are gone? Restrictions are gone, mandates are gone. I went to a terrific performance in a theater last night, packed with a lot of people. Maybe, I don't know, 10% of us had masks on, masks optional, needless to say, despite the fact that Suffolk and Middlesex County and a bunch of others have just moved into that middle range. Should we be concerned about the disappearance of all these public health protections, Doctor?
Yeah, no, this is a time when we need to be vigilant. And unfortunately, so many people are tired. This has been going on for a few years now, and people are tired of having to undergo certain requirements. So I totally understand and I get it. But the other thing to emphasize is that we have more knowledge and we have more measures, and we know that a layered approach is how we get to the other side. My personal recommendation to people is, number one, if you haven't gotten boosted, and a lot of people who are eligible to be boosted in Massachusetts are not yet boosted,
I know that.
It is time to get that booster. It is also time that we use a lot of different measures that we have. We have testing that's available. It's during the summer now, so if you have an activity that you want to do it outdoors if possible. So we really need to use all the different measures that we have. But the good news is we actually have those. When I was on the wards in the spring 2020, when we had nothing, and the overwhelming majority of people who were coming to us were very sick and dying, this was a very dire circumstance. We're in a different place, and I do understand that people are tired, but we still have to use the different measures that we have available.
Dr. Sachs, it's hard to disagree with the notion that people are tired, but I don't want my leaders to be tired. If they have concerns, I want them to tell me the hard truth and tell me what they think I should do based on the science. Should leaders be doing more, or are they just afraid to confront their constituents and say, sorry, you got to put the mask back on?
That's a very good question. From a policy perspective, we can make recommendations such as masking in public places, crowded public places is recommended, masking in public transport is recommended, masking on airplanes and trains is recommended. Whether a mandate would help or not, I think is questionable. And I don't know that we have the data that says we should put mandates back in place. I do know that mandates have gone back up in some regions. From my perspective, I'm not sure we're there yet here in the New England area. So I would say, still be careful, realize that there is a risk of catching COVID. If you're eligible to get treated, one thing I should mention is that we do have widely available treatments for COVID-19. If you're eligible to get that treatment, I highly encourage that you do so. And the treatment is very good at keeping people out of the hospital. So let's keep going forward with more treatment if we can.
Other than the fact that it tastes like a rusty iron beam, it is very effective. I can speak to that. Dr. Assoumou, we also, I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning or not, I meant to, is that Massachusetts is moving from daily to weekly reporting. Does that make your jobs harder?
I would, at a time when we have a subvariant that we know is more transmissible and more immune evasive, I would have personally liked to have had access to more data. But it is true that we do have a lot of different ways to get a sense of what is actually going on. We have wastewater. We could also rely on hospitalizations and deaths. But I would have personally liked to have seen those reports be more frequent during a time when this current subvariant is increasing.
Dr. Sachs, my understanding is you're not directly involved in this, but I believe your hospital, some of your colleagues are. This identification of these markers for long COVID, which a lot of people believe or actually are suffering from, what kind of optimism should we feel about this? And if they have succeeded, what does that help us do in terms of diagnosis and treatment?
Well, one of the big frustrations for people who have long COVID is that there's no test that really confirms whether they do or don't have it. I mean, I would say, though, that based on a lot of the clinical complaints that people have, that we can make a pretty confident diagnosis. But what the researchers found in this study was that they were able to find evidence of the spike protein in people with long COVID And what that shows is that either the actual virus is still present or remnants of the virus are still present. And then that leads to the question of, is that remnant or is that virus causing long COVID? And if it is, looking at ways to eradicate it will be very important. And one thing I know that lots of people have talked about is, would antiviral therapy help people with long COVID? And something I think should be urgently studied.
Dr. Assoumou, we only have less than a minute left. When a parent comes to you and says, I'm nervous that school in the fall is going to be deja vu all over again, what do you say to them?
Well, I am that parent.
Okay. What do you say to yourself?
I am that parent. Yeah, no, so couple of things. So right now at this point, children of all ages are eligible to be vaccinated. So the first thing I would say is get your child vaccinated. They are eligible. Talk to your pediatrician if you have questions. Look at what's going on in your community. And if levels are high, it may be time to mask in indoor settings, and talk to your school and see what it is that the school can do to improve indoor ventilation. I've done that with my school, and I'm working with them so that we can improve all those measures. So we have a lot of measures, and parents need to be more proactive to be able to make sure that we open school safely again. And we do know that in-person learning is critical and very important.
Well, all I can say, Dr. Assoumou, is I'm glad my daughters are grown. Dr. Assoumou, Dr. Sachs, as always, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Jim.
Thank you.
While plenty of people have been marching in the streets since the Supreme Court declared last month that abortion access was no longer a constitutional right, businesses have been reacting as well. In some cases, as with giants like Walmart and McDonald's, with silence that has spoken volumes. But according to a recent examination of more than 1,300 companies, more than 100 are leading on abortion rights since Roe was overturned, announcing policies like pay for employees to travel to states where abortions are legal. I'm joined by the authors of the study, all from the Yale Chief Executive Leadership Institute. Jeffrey Sonnenfeld is its president. Stephen Tian is the director of research. Georgia Hirsty is a research fellow focusing on corporate social impact. Jeffrey, Stephen, good to see you. Georgia, good to meet you. Thanks for being here, all three of you.
Great to see you again, Jeff. Thanks.
Jeffrey, last time you were here, for those who don't recall, you had just completed a study of major American corporations on one extreme that had totally pulled their business out of Russia after the invasion of Ukraine, the other extreme, business as usual. What did you set out to do here after the overturning of Roe?
What we wanted to see is trying to understand who moves first on these issues. There is a kind of a cynicism among some journalists and some ideologues on the right to try to vilify what they call the woke CEOs. The CEOs don't feel that pressure. They're not afraid of reprisals, but different ones respond to different issues as to who's going to be in the front lines. For example, when we spoke before, we were surprised that it was big tech, big oil, and professional service firms that had moved first of those 1,300 companies that pulled out of Russia. Those are not usually on the leading edge of social change issues, but there are different reasons why it was they and not fashion and fragrances and consumer products the way it usually is. And in this case, we thought, let's try to figure out what's common with the first movers on this front, because we similarly on gun safety or on climate change or on immigration reform or voting rights, it's different organizations who take the lead, and then other CEOs follow.
Stephen, what was the criterion for including someone on the first mover list? What did the company have to have agreed to do?
Well, I think I'll let Georgia jump in on this one as well. But what we're really looking for, Jim, is for companies that have provided an extra level of support for their employees in wake of the decision. And that support can take many levels. The most common level of support is agreeing to pay for travel to a different state. And I think my colleague Georgia can jump in with some more specifics there as well.
Georgia, do you want to do some jumping?
I'll do some jumping, yes. One of the other things that was really important to us was looking to see which companies made a public statement, issued a release, let us know that, let kind of the world know that they were taking this stance and going to provide additional support for reproductive health for their employees.
And Georgia, staying with you, what was the motivator? Apparently, according to my reading of the reports in your study, it was not some deep ideological commitment to the issue. Is that correct?
That is correct. And, you know, it's not to make any comment on people's personal politics or ideology, but it is to say that what we found was that rather than these kind of ideological perspectives, it was really the strategic considerations that these companies were making about whether or not they were going to take a public stance on this.
What does strategic mean? Meaning, well, the bottom line, is that what it means?
Not necessarily. For example, we found that tech companies made up about a third of that initial mover group, and that tech companies' employees on average are 5 years younger than the national average of other workers. And we know that younger people tend to be more supportive of the right to choose. And so that is strategic when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to retention, and when it comes to giving potential employees what they want, which is their leaders to take stances.
Look, we have some data on what you're talking about. There's a recent Morning Consult poll about the generational divide of strong support, quote, strong support for companies speaking out about abortion access. Exactly what you say. Gen Z, that's up to 25, 51%. Millennials, 35%. That's up to 41, and you see it drops with Gen X. One last thing for you, Georgia. What was counterintuitive to me is there was not a disproportionate share, or maybe it's not counterintuitive in light of what you said, there was not a disproportionate share of the first movers who were led by women CEOs. Is that not correct?
That is correct. And also not disproportionate women on boards. And I think it kind of, you know, it goes against this, what Jeffrey mentioned earlier around companies people wanting to dismiss some of these movements as being woke. And it really is speaking to what the kind of national, you know, movement is around these issues.
So Jeffrey, give us a list of some high profile, I'll call them winners. I'll add a judgment to it. You don't have to. Tell us who some of the high profile first movers have been.
Well, they include, believe it or not, professional services, finance, and technology are 2/3 of the list. And that list is about 120 companies that have been first movers. It includes Apple, Intuit, the Microsoft, IBM, say of the tech companies, the finance, JP Morgan, Citigroup, professional services, EY, Deloitte, KPMG, Price Waterhouse, PwC, Bain, BCG, McKinsey. And again, we don't usually expect that these companies are always on a frontier of social change, or many times these are the companies that would often rather jump off a cliff than get involved in controversy or social issues. But they have, because of the younger workforce. I mean, some of these firms, some of these CPA consulting firms are individually hiring as many as 60,000 millennials a year. And as your data just showed from that Morning Consult data, is we don't know if this will last forever. We remember what happened to we Woodstockers. Maybe you're too young for that, but I remember the Woodstockers.
Unfortunately, I am not too young for that, but continue. Go ahead.
Well, we used to parade around these values as we rode our white stallions of idealism into schools. And as some drove their limousines back out again, they traded off some of those Woodstock values. But there's a belief that somehow there's a virtue that will be robust, that where this generation shops, where they invest, and where they go to work is very much driven by social image.
I think I have a naked photo of you from Woodstock, actually, but we can talk about that after the show. You know, Stephen, I want to clarify one point. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is Amazon has also made a statement saying they want to support their workers, will pay for them to go to other states. But the catch there is most of their workers are hourly workers who wouldn't be covered by their benevolence. Am I right about that?
There's a lot of nuances in terms of different degrees of coverage, in terms of different health plans and different policies that insurers are working out. And we fully acknowledge that all of those nuances are there. And as with what we saw with the business retreat, some of these nuances do take a little bit of time to work out. But what's so important to recognize is companies that are taking the right steps in those directions. And that's what the purpose of the list tries to capture.
Well, George, I want to get to another part. I'm sorry, Jeffrey.
All
What's that?
is their goal? And some of them haven't quite gotten there yet, but you're great to ask that question.
Okay. Georgia, one other thing maybe I shouldn't be confused again. Very small percentage of this 118, 120 are headquartered in red states, which led me to a conclusion which you may disabuse me of, is they're promising to pay for their workers to go to other states because they won't have to. Is that, what conclusion should one draw, if any, from the fact that there's so few that are headquartered in red or likely anti-abortion states?
Yeah, that's a great question. And obviously we noticed that as well. And I think one of the things for me is that looking at kind of the legislatures and the government of these red states and what the implications are for those companies, a lot of the companies in other instances have made public stances. And so again, it comes back to, I think, some of these strategic considerations that the companies in red states are taking. And some of them maybe do have the same kind of support for their employees and just aren't coming out publicly about it. I think that is more of the edge that we kind of go to, rather than saying that companies in blue states are doing so because they won't have to pay. A lot of these companies also had plans in place before the overturning of Roe and are just kind of reestablishing, letting us know that those things exist.
Jeffrey,
if I could jump in on that one.
Yes, please.
Thanks. I completely agree with Georgia. There are some outliers. For example, in Texas, you could see Dell and American Airlines have raised eyebrows because of their courage to take those positions on this matter, much the way Coca-Cola and Delta Airlines on voting rights took an early move, and they're based, of course, in Georgia, is that they're going against the grain. It's not easy. And I think those CEOs and those boards deserve some extra recognition. In the blue states, though, as Georgia say, there are governors like Governor Lamont here in Connecticut that are waving around a major campaign trying to attract businesses into a place where women's health is celebrated, childcare, and many kinds of social issues are seen as an attractive place to work. They always see these surveys that talk about best states for employers to locate their business. Somebody should be doing a survey, which are the best states for people to work in, the best places for employees.
Well, Jeffrey, staying with you for a second, broader than just employees making decisions, there are governors like our own, Republican Charlie Baker, and like Illinois' Democrat Pritzker, who are actively and publicly encouraging companies in states that don't protect reproductive freedom for women to do whatever expansion they're going to do in their states. Can you see companies making decisions based on that criterion?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. I in all candor, I chair something called Advanced CT, which is the state's economic development authority. I co-chair it.
Yeah.
And we just had a meeting on Friday with 3 very large corporate relocation services, which I'm often been critical of because I often felt that they have an incentive just to keep companies moving, and it's often from blue to red states. They are telling us, these 3, that are getting a lot of backlash right now from employee groups that are feeding back to their employers. They don't want to move to those red states because of some of these issues they're anti-science, if they're anti-education, and if they're anti-free choice and taking rights away from people. So I think absolutely it's becoming a critical dimension right now in these corporate relocations.
Georgia, Stephen, Jeffrey, congratulations on your work, and thanks for spending some time with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you want to see all the 118, or maybe it was 120 companies that have stepped up on this issue, which I strongly encourage you to check out, we've linked to the full list on the YouTube video of this show segment. You can find that at youtube.com/GBH News. Next up, even before inflation rates started skyrocketing, there was a Maine parenting staple getting increasingly hard to come by, particularly for low-income families: diapers. And as Alexi Cohen found out, these days, keeping up with demand for diapers is harder than ever for families and local organizations.
Angelica Delgado uses upwards of 40 diapers a week, caring for 1-month-old Jaden, 2-year-old Angel, and 4-year-old Angelina. It costs around $100 a week to keep her shelves stocked at home, and it's not easy.
I am a single mom of 3. I take care of them. I only work 2 days out of the week, so I provide more.
According to the National Diaper Bank, 1 in 3 American families struggles with diaper needs. CEO Joanne Goldblum says being unable to find diapers can hurt a parent's chance to work.
Most child care centers require parents to provide an adequate supply of disposable diapers every day. And so if you don't have those diapers, you can't use childcare. And if you can't use childcare, you can't go to work.
Going to the store is a lot of work too. With 3 kids, finding diapers, and sometimes they don't have it, and I would have to go to another store. If not, I would just have to get a different size.
But those different sizes are more likely to leak and need to be changed more often, which is yet more money and sometimes means making sacrifices elsewhere.
Diapers for sure come second for all my bills. It's really hard because I don't have that much help.
Delgado gets assistance from places like the South End Community Health Center for diapers and other supplies.
I feel less stressful because even though their father's not involved, I can actually go somewhere like the clinic or even the hospital and ask for diapers.
During the pandemic, the center got funding from the Boston Resiliency Fund, and they were able to give out 2 large packages of diapers to about 300 families twice a month. Since that funding dried up, they've turned to nonprofit Cradles to Crayons for their supply. But with that, they're only able to offer diapers twice a year to around 600 families.
We cannot keep up with what we see as just overwhelming demand.
Cradles to Crayons founder and CEO Lynn Marguerio said in the organization's 20 years, the demand has never been higher, up 300% over the past 3 years, and she doesn't expect it to slow down anytime soon.
It was bad before the pandemic, it's gotten worse, and now with inflation at record levels, we can't keep up. There's just a lack of predictability. There are still a lot of supply chain issues.
And the recent loss of the child tax credit is making a bad situation even worse.
We're finding that demand from the families who are struggling financially is just reverberating up the supply chain to us, and we just need more systemic solutions to address what is a grave problem.
A grave problem that is just one of several for many parents of young kids these days.
I'm worried about the parents who just want the best for their kids, and they're doing the best that they can, but it's too expensive, and the burden is just awful.
As for now, there's no relief in sight for local parents. Alexi Cohan, GBH News.
Massachusetts is one of 13 states that exempts diapers from state tax, which offers some help, but a bill that would go much further, creating a pilot program to fund local diaper banks, has been sitting with the House Ways and Means Committee since February. That's it for tonight. Please come back tomorrow. The January 6th hearings return with a focus on the extremist groups involved in the attack, their possible connections to Trump's inner circle, and if we're lucky, maybe a Pat Cipollone cameo or two. We'll bring you the biggest moments in full analysis. That's tomorrow at 7. For now, thank you for watching, and please don't forget Ukraine.